Compliance, the final frontier. Tom Fox is the voyager of trekking through compliance. His mission? To explore the original series and seek out and share what it can teach you about compliance. Here's your host, Tom Fox.
Episode 25, Errand of Mercy. In this episode of Trekking Through Compliance, we consider the episode Errand of Mercy, which aired on March 16, 1967, and occurred on Stardate 3194.8. After negotiations with the Klingons break down, the Enterprise is sent to block Klingon expansion on the Class M planet Organia, described by Spock as Class D on the Richter scale of culture. After being attacked, the Enterprise destroys a Klingon vessel. Shortly thereafter, Uhura reports that a state of war has been declared between the Federation and the Klingons. The Enterprise then enters orbit around Organia despite a warning from Unit XY75847 that a fleet of Klingon ships is in their sector. Spock and Kirk beam down to Organia to warn the populace of the impending Klingon invasion. Strangely, the Organians do not appear the least concerned about the strangers beaming into their midst and do not appear the least worried about the prospect of Klingon occupation. Ayaborn, chairman of the Council of Elders, greets them and invites Kirk to speak to the council. Kirk offers protection from the Klingons, but Ayaborn says his people have no need of defenses and are not in danger. This laissez-faire attitude seems consistent from a report that Spock presented of the Society of Organia, which has been completely stagnant for tens of thousands of years. In the meantime, the Klingon fleet arrives and Sulu is forced to warp the Enterprise out of the vicinity, stranding Kirk and Spock. A party of heavily armed Klingons then beams down, and according to one of the elders, and despite the fact that Spock's tricorder has no way of ascertaining this. The Organians disguise Kirk and Spock as natives in an attempt to protect them from the harm at the Klingon hands. Ayaborn bids welcome to the Klingon Corps, who declares himself the military governor of Organia and claims that Kirk is Barona, one of Organia's leading citizens. Spock is harder to explain, but he claims that he is a dealer in Kivas and Trillium. Corps finds Kirk's lack of complacency and obvious hatred of the Klingons refreshing on a planet otherwise filled with passive Organians and declares him the liaison between the Klingons and the people of Organia. Despite the force for mind probing of Spock's mind by the Klingon mind probing device, Spock is able to maintain his merchant pretext and is allowed to go free. Kirk and Spock attempt to interfere with the Klingon occupation and incite the natives to defend themselves by blowing up a Klingon munitions dump. When Kirk admits what he has done to Ayaborn, he is admonished. Unfortunately, Corps has bugged the council chambers and prepares to mind probe Kirk and then execute him. However, Ayaborn declares that is unnecessary since Barona's true identity is actually James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. Corps then threatens to fry Kirk's mind and dissect Spock to find out how he is capable of foiling the mind scanner unless Kirk tells him all he wants to know. He is given 12 hours and thrown into a cell with Spock in the meantime. However, Ayaborn lets them out, and despite the fact that the Klingons are vigorously guarding the cell, they observe nothing. As revenge, the Klingons initiate mass execution of 200 Organians and threaten to kill 200 more every 2 hours unless the escaped prisoners are returned. However, the Organians continue to insist on nonviolence. Kirk then threatens physical injury to Ayaborn unless he returns their phasers, which he wants to use in a two-man suicide attack against the Klingons. Ayaborn is shocked by Kirk's behavior but agrees to let them have the phasers. Spock reports that the odds of them returning alive from their mission are 77,824.7 to 1. They begin by killing 2 Klingon guards and then waylay and pump another Klingon for information. Spock reports the odds of surviving have now improved to 7,000 to 1. Kirk and Spock manage to take Corps prisoner just as the Federation and Klingon fleets are massing for an attack in the Organian system. At this point, the Organian Council brings all weapons and instruments of violence to a temperature of 350 degrees, including those on the Enterprise. Ayaborn then immobilizes all fighting forces on both sides, producing an immediate cessation of hostilities, which the Federation and Klingons subsequently maintain. It turns out the Organians are actually advanced beings capable of creating illusions, and so they were never actually inconvenienced by the Klingons to begin with. Spock notes that the Organians are as far above the humans on the evolutionary scale as humans are above the single-celled amoeba. So what is the fun fact from today's episode? Well, this was the first appearance of the Klingons, and in the episode, Ayabor notes that in the future, Klingons and Earthlings will be allies, a prediction that is not borne out until Star Trek IV, the movie, and Star Trek, the Next Generation television series. So what are some of the compliance lessons from this episode of Trekking Through Compliance? Well, the first one is trust but verify. You can certainly trust the information that a third-party intermediary or other person provides to you, but you've got to verify that information. And here, Kirk and Spock trusted the readings their tricorder gave them, but they really failed to investigate more fully the Organians to understand how far they were above the humans or Vulcans in the evolutionary scale. So it's a really good lesson around that basic Ronnie Reagan truism. Second, and out of the Johnson Controls case came the following. If your subsidiary's financial statements are too complicated for you to decipher, you have a problem. So if your internal audit, your CFE, your CFO cannot decipher the financial statements of one of your subsidiaries, it is a recipe for disaster because it could clearly be hiding a fraud, a corruption, a something. So if you can't understand how your subsidiary does business, you've got a big problem. And finally, number 3, do you know how far down your third-party relationships extend? Do your third-party agents have third parties who work for them? Do you have visibility into them? This has become a more critical analysis going forward and something that you seriously need to think about as part of your compliance program. I hope you will join us tomorrow on Trekking Through Compliance, where we take up the alternative factor.
If you enjoyed this episode of Trekking Through Compliance, you can help it grow by sharing it with the biggest Trek fan you know.